Breaking: Putin issues surprise Trump announcement, media stunned. The mainstream media hates that Trump is capable of working with our rivals. They lie about Trump's connections with Putin and intentionally put pressure on American-Russian relations. Putin has surrendered to Trump's Syrian concerns. In order to protect Syrian civilians, Russian President Vladimir Putin has approved a plan for the establishment of buffer zones, saying, "As far as I understood, the American administration supports these ideas." Trump wins again. This story upsets the mainstream media, big time. These are the types of stories we like to see, patriots. Obama could never have negotiated a deal like this. Trump really is the master of the deal. The left is in full panic mode. They cannot stand seeing Trump succeed. They will try to paint this as a loss, or they will say this is proof Trump has Russian connections. We know this isn't true. After 8 years of Obama, it is nice to finally see a competent president. We need to make sure that more conservatives are voted into office, because this is a great winning streak. The left is having a meltdown. Our military is finally being rebuilt after the devastating Obama era. We will build new ships, tanks, bombs, and weaponry for our brave soldiers. Best of all, we will support our veterans. This is a great change from the past. Obama didn't care about our veterans. He didn't care when the veterans weren't receiving the care they deserved at the Veterans Administration. Now, we will fix our broken system. Liberals don't like the military. I don't understand it, but it is probably because they hate victory and strength. The left doesn't like to compete. They don't understand the point of competition, which is why we need more conservatives. The rhinos are just like the Democrats, they hate competition, as well. Thankfully, Donald Trump is applying pressure to the rhinos, so we will finally drain the swamp. We will take care of Syria, too. The radical Islamic terrorists need to watch out for Trump. With Trump's expert negotiating skills, the whole world will reject radical Islam, and we will restore order. We are not going to let Sharia law replace our system of laws and rules. The left needs to surrender and admit failure. They cannot be trusted, and if Clinton were in office, the Syrian situation would have deteriorated into war. We need to make sure the left doesn't return to power. Obama and Clinton are probably plotting the A grand return, and we shouldn't be surprised by that. Obama is likely furious that Trump has undone all of his job-killing regulations. We now have a pro-American president who cares about us hard-working Americans. What do you think about Putin's announcement? Share this article on Facebook and let us know what you think because we want to hear your voice. Muslim refugees outraged after Arizona finds simple way to get them out of the state. Here's how. Muslim refugees in one particularly savvy state in the nation are fleeing in large numbers to find refuge elsewhere in the U.S. after being sent there in droves from Barack Obama's refugee program. There was nothing this place could do to prevent them from coming, but residents found the perfect plan to get them to leave on their own once they got there. Now, these Muslims can't get out of there fast enough after what they found out shortly after arrival. The flood of migrants that infiltrated the nation in Obama's last days in office, settled in some states more than others where they have become a big burden on residents who didn't want them there to begin with. Arizona saw a massive influx, receiving more than their fair share into the state as part of the former president's plan to resettle 110,000 refugees in America before President Donald Trump took office and dramatically slowed the immigration flow. Before the immigration ban went into effect, Arizona had already absorbed approximately 7,000 unvetted migrants that they didn't know what to do with, until now. While liberal states are gladly leaving their doors wide open to refugees from terrorist-tied countries, they better make room for more as there's a new wave of them coming from Arizona. Somalis who landed there are realizing they got placed in the wrong state, and the problem seems to be solving itself now at no additional cost to taxpayers who were forced to foot the bill for their new entitled neighbors. They also brilliantly avoided the penalty imposed by Obama should they have shipped them out, rather than these leeches leaving on their own. 2 months after arriving in the Phoenix area, A Somali refugee and her 7 kids were packing up their bags and heading to Minnesota, where things would be much better for them in one big way they weren't getting in Arizona. Bilad Yusuf, like thousands of others who recently arrived, found out that the welfare wasn't free and they were going to have to work to earn it, and were also expected to learn the language. "We didn't know how to get jobs here, and even if we did, we didn't know how we'd get to them," she complained in her native tongue, which had to be interpreted by a translator. Yusuf has actually been in the US for longer than her time in Arizona, as she and her kids were first dropped off in Houston before being transferred to Phoenix. With all that time on her hands in the state, she didn't get a job or bother to learn English, which backfired on her and other refugees in the same boat who wound up in Arizona. Stranded in the urban sprawl without a car, they found themselves lost. Where were they supposed to get groceries? How did they go about setting up long overdue doctor's appointments? How would they pay rent after their initial stipend from the US government ran out? Phoenix New Times reported. These were questions that the state decided the refugees need to answer for themselves. Yusuf and her older children were all capable of getting jobs and didn't, since their communication skills were practically non-existent, and they didn't do anything about it. Now they're on their way to Minnesota, where, like the majority of Somali Muslims in the country, they have family there. Minnesota is also one of the most refugee-friendly states in the nation, catering more to these Muslims over their own citizens. So, Yusuf and all of her kids will be more than comfortable there and no longer Arizona's problem. Mukhtar Sheikh, the program coordinator for the Somali Association of Arizona, said refugees who are resettled in Arizona receive relatively little financial assistance from the state. In fact, their main source of cash assistance is the federal government, according to Phoenix New Times. After receiving a one-time payment of $925, refugees in Arizona are expected to get a job and are given resources to help them do so, which apparently aren't used to often. Although they are given limited food stamps and access to some medical services after the lump sum is spent, they often run out of these resources before the end of every month and want more handouts like what Muslims other states receive. For this reason, they give up on Arizona and run to the first state that will make life easier for them so they don't have to work or learn the language and can live comfortably. Arizona's legal and effective approach to combating the immigration issue in their own state has prevented Muslims from being host to cells of uneducated colonies of refugees who don't seek to better themselves and exist to leech off others. These groups don't assimilate into our culture, they take from it while wreaking havoc on communities who are forced to accept them, breaking multiple deadly attacks, all with one sick thing in common: cops expected to address nation. In the last 3 to 4 days, there have been multiple deaths and more injuries throughout prominent parts of Texas, which some consider to be America's heartland. The murders have gone largely unreported, mostly by mainstream media, who appears to be intent on hiding one key fact that has since been discovered about a horrific trend sweeping conservative areas in the country. An astonishing number of attacks in college campuses and surrounding areas have kept officials across the Lone Star State busy and bracing for more. Practically daily, officers have had to respond to shots in these areas, where at least 2 lives have already been claimed before they got the call. However, these incidents have become far too common to be coincidence, and the killers all share a shocking connection or goal in mind that the media seems to want to ignore for even worse reason. While studying for her class, young Janira Nicole Gonzalez was found dead of a gunshot wound in the common study area inside the Performance Hall building around noon Wednesday, Dallas News reported. Not far from this innocent girl's body was 21-year-old Adrian Victor Torres, who was found a short time later in a nearby locker room, dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators say that Torres was her obsessed admirer and killed Gonzalez before taking his own life, in what's been described as a murder-suicide mission. However, 2 other attacks in the state start to looking eerily familiar. Only 32 minutes from the Northlake College, an EMT was shot dead while responding to an emergency call in Dallas. Authorities said around 11:30 a.m. local time, emergency responders were treating a civilian who had been shot Monday morning when a man approached them and opened fire, CBS reported. The victim they were attending to had suffered fatal wounds and the EMT surprisingly survived the subsequent attack. The alleged shooter, according to sources, is Derek Lamont Brown, 36, according to CBS, who reported he was found a short time later dead of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Interestingly, and perhaps playing into the motive, was that Brown was on an FBI watch list for protest activities and anti-government involvement, according to KTVT-TV. Tingnanang message Twitter. On and around the same times as these attacks this week, starting Monday in Texas, was an incident where 4 students at the University of Texas in Austin were stabbed, one of which died from their wounds. The 21-year-old attacker, Kendrick White, denied remembering stabbing 4 people and killing one, sealing his insanity plea. White may have been targeting additional victims, but was stopped by a UT police officer as he entered Jester Center dormitory, according to the American Statesman. Outside of all these attacks, which took place in a span of 3 days, having Texas as the location in common, InfoWars suggested that there is a more unifying factor at play in these crimes which will spread like a cancer throughout the country if left unchecked. Political and racial tensions aren't just prevalent in America, it's become dramatic in South Africa as well, which the site believes could be a premonition of what's to come in the US, as suggested by this rash of recent crimes. While their country assertively speaks out against these atrocities, we here in America are waiting for authorities to show these victims a little dignity in publicly addressing their deaths and how they plan to prevent future fatalities. Civil defense expert Simon Roche told InfoWars that leftist South African leaders have in recent months threatened the slaughter of all whites, and the removal of all whites within 5 years, prompting Cylinders to prepare for a surprise civil war event which they now believe is imminent. Cylinders is the world's largest non-state civil defense organization located in South Africa, which represents and seeks to protect the country's minority Christian white population in the event of an ethnic civil war, according to the site. In other words, our South African government is at least tacitly complicit in these astronomical crime rates, he said. State-sponsored genocide, one arm's length removed, according to InfoWars. And he, Stanton, explained how he believed it was a low-intensity conflict to erode the periphery of the white population as a preparation for something bigger. Whether this is speculation or potential reality, what we know for sure is that in a 3-day period, all of these heinous crimes have been largely absent from the mainstream media. This is due in part to the ethnicity and potential motive of the attacker, which doesn't fit with the liberal narrative which insists on perpetuating that immigrants and activists mean no harm.